Guardiola is back. I mean, to real football taking over his seat as a king when it comes to real football. Big game in the Manchester derby. Ruben Amorim, still a lot of problems over there for him. I thought this was probably going to be one of those games where Ruben Amorim can use to reinvent himself as a manager in any club, Manchester United. But then still, it's a drab for them, of course, in that big Manchester derby. That's exactly what's happened. But before that, there was a big one in the game at Liverpool and Burnley, in the English Premier League. See, what Liverpool did against Burnley, I've seen it several times before. Last season, that is exactly what champions do. Fiifi-Manfred on YouTube. Fiifi-Manfred on YouTube. If you're not subscribed to the channel, subscribe. Turn on notification. In the notification turning, do choose all, just so anytime that there is content, you are first to have it on Fiifi-Manfred on YouTube. Send Bibia, come, we can delve into the details of Azi on Fiifi-Manfred on YouTube. Let's get straight to it. First off, let's say a big thank you to the two people who have made this show a possibility. First off, Yesumo Spare Parts Dealership Shop. Say spare parts in Kwanda Michelle. Go to Abosel Kind Post Office. Call them on 0593138221. 0593138221. Or, of course, the entire open clothes to power want to look clean, then it's MOB clothing or to do a flower station or L2 to call them on 0200-668-708, 0200-668-708, and Bibia and come just so he can take very, very good care of you. I was on Fiifi-Manfred on YouTube and Bibia and come, and for there are a lot of details for us to get into, a lot of analysis. I was on Fiifi-Manfred on YouTube. You didn't come on because we've had it. It started today in the first game of the day that went straight in the English Premier League. Huge one. That was first of Liverpool game and ball away at Burnley at Turf Moor. For Liverpool, everybody knows that they've gotten their man in a brand friend Alexander Isak. So then obviously they've gotten the players that will come in to come and get a job done in them. But the starting lineup, even the team that traveled away to Turf Moor to go and play against team your friend of Burnley, Ariana Brantia, your friend of Alexander Isak was absent. He was not there. Alexander Isak was not part of that game. It was still the regular lineup by him. And before the game started, journalists did ask Papa, your friend Anna Slot, why he didn't start Abantia, your friend Alexander Isak. And I say, I can assure fans that he will be involved on Wednesday, but this game came a bit too early. It's best for him to have a proper week of training. That's exactly what Anslot said. Say, Charlie, if it's about Abantia friend Alexander Isak, he had not had a full week of training to himself, and in that it's important that he gets a full week training to himself. So he can assure Liverpool fans say they will get that full week of training, to Abantia friend Alexander Isak, and of course they should allow him rest so that he can come back and train consistently and play for team the football club Liverpool and of course that is why he was left out of the conversation. Very interesting one over there when it comes to that big game and the conversation that went on with it. Of course, Liverpool started game with a lineup that we are familiar with. We knew that he make in the first half Andy Robertson some changes there, Coco. So I'll explain that to you why Andy Robertson came in the first half, very, very early on inside game away at Burnley in the English Premier League. And Burnley under Scott Parker this season, they've not started badly. In fact, in the English Premier League this season, newly promoted teams now have been very, very difficult to deal with. Liverpool going to Burnley, it was not going to be a straightforward game. And I think that Scott Parker and Emirates, gave themselves a good audition. They played very well. They stayed in the game as long as possible. They made it difficult for Liverpool to really impact the game in that regard, and they made things difficult for them. Of course, Liverpool could give them with a very, very interesting lineup for that matter. Lineup of a team that we knew, of course, in pose. Brent here, friend Alisson Becker. He was right there in pose for team friend in Liverpool. Of course, at the back, we knew that Brent here, friend of Vale Van Dijk was going to be one of those two centre backs that are going to be in there. Ibrahima Konate was next to him. Of course, in terms of fullback, Milos Kekes and Brent here, friend Abrantia, your friend Domenico Szoboszlai started the game in that regard as a midfield, as the back four. On the middle of the pack, Alex McAllister, Ryan Gravenberch, and Abrantia friend Florian Wirtz was up top, Cody Gakpo, and Hugo Ekitike, and Abrantia, your friend Mohamed Salah led the lines of Liverpool Football Club. In the first half, there was something interesting that happened. Liverpool forum, Milos Kekes equity yellow card. And Arne Slot is very good in terms of this game management thing. Usually, when these things happen to his teams, now he knows that one player, the decision that has gone on in the game will affect his team. He doesn't relent in making changes. And that's exactly what Arne Slot we are branching from Milos Kekes Frimo, now Ode Robertson, Ebabeshin Fiifi-Manfred to really dictate the pace of the game. And Andy Robertson, Slot makes a rare substitution in halftime. Andy Robertson comes on for Milos Kekes, who was on an early yellow card. It was very interesting. In fact, throughout the game at Turf Moor, Burnley were very aggressive, very solid. It wasn't too much of a low block. It was similar to what Crystal Palace and then Brentford played in such a manner against Chelsea. It's a 5 at the back, but in the outside centre backs are willing and aggressive enough to close down those half spaces for the Liverpool players. So whether it's for Florian Wirtz, whether it's for Domenico Szoboszlai, whether it's for Cody Gakpo coming inside, or even Hugo Ekitike. One of the things that Liverpool did very well is to make sure that they close down those spaces quicker. They close down those spaces. Burnley did better. Was to make sure they close down those spaces better. And I think that was a very well coached game from Scott Parker. And then the Martiano in those spaces. And after 45 minutes, it was 22% of ball possession to Burnley. They didn't need the ball. It was about really staying compact, clogging those spaces, preventing Liverpool from creating those chances in the half spaces against them. Liverpool falling at 78% of ball possession. Burnley for no normal, but two shots, and then Liverpool ball 10. 0 on target for Burnley, but just 1. So it means that Liverpool had the possession, they had a chunk of it, but then Burnley forced them to have the possession in places where it was not hurting them their play. It was not worrying to Burnley. They were okay for Liverpool to have the ball in such zones. And I think that was an excellent game plan for Scott Parker. Of course, in the game, Burnley had played only 50 passes. Actually, this is pure haram ball from Burnley. That's exactly what these middle table relegation threatening teams are beginning to do. They are aggressive. 3-back aggressive in the half spaces. Aggressive. If you want to play out from the back, they allow you. But Liverpool tend to have a lot of tools to go along and win second balls, to make sure that they pick the second balls, to run the channels very well. They tend to have the players that are able to play in different styles, different plans, and different ability, making sure that they are very important in the course of the game, in different parts of it for themselves. It looks as if it's something that Liverpool do very, very well in that regard. And it was a total dominance in the first half. Of course, Burnley following 1 corner, Liverpool in 7 corners. The first half alone, 7 corners, trying to break down a very stubborn Burnley side who had come to the English Premier League. Of course, with Abrantia friend Leslie Gochuku, of course, Kylie Walker in the middle of the park to make the game very good. In fact, throughout the second half, it was the same story. Liverpool for essentially having the ball and trying so much to make sure they can open team your friend and Burnley create the better chances for themselves, and then make sure they can go into the game and then win the game very, very well in that regard. And of course, it was difficult. It was very, very difficult. Okay, the XG's map nearby. It wasn't an easy game in terms of how Liverpool are going to go into it, how Liverpool are trying to create the better chances. In fact, Liverpool constantly ping them back and force them to create a lot of chances. And this means it's a similar story for Liverpool. And I remember saying in the course of the game as it was going on, I did tweets that I've seen Liverpool play like this before. Even, in fact, not just this season, but throughout last season. Saying, I remember Bournemouth held them last minute to break in a certain Darwin Nunez, who comes to score 2 quick goals and then makes Liverpool win the game by 2-0 at the death. In fact, even this season, Liverpool have had an 88-minute winner against Bournemouth in the opening game of the season, Anfield. Then, of course, they went on in a 100-minute winner, Rio Ngamoha, at Newcastle United, 83rd minute winner against Arsenal, English Premier League from a set play from Domenico Szoboszlai, and then 95th minute winning winner for Abrantia for Liverpool for, of course, a goal from Abrantia, your friend Mohamed Salah. Mohamed Salah, of course, that is very, very important from there. You see, in the second half, Liverpool did not stop. And I've said several times that one of the things that makes Liverpool a very strong team to play against in this setup when you sit behind them is that, one, they're able to stretch play. Two, because they have box presence of players that are 6 foot plus in terms of height, they're able to spam in the crosses. And Liverpool constantly spamming crosses. In the second half, almost they are bent here, Jeremy Frimpong, Ebabeshe game him, and of course, as a right winger who is more attacking based, it was a game set for him. Burnley had pinned back. They had lots of, they didn't have lots of the ball. They were sitting in two backs of four, and what it means that Liverpool had to stretch the play, and they constantly did so. Crosses from the wide areas in Jabanti friend Jeremy Frimpong, crosses from the left hand side, constantly in the box. But before Liverpool were going to get a goal, it was a huge one where Abrantia, your friend Leslie Ugochukwu, in the second half yellow card, made sure say Liverpool were up by a man's advantage. Leslie Ugochukwu was sent the marching orders. Liverpool scored 1 goal, 27 shots, 4 shots on target, 2.45 xGs. That is exactly Liverpool for the criteria. 1 goal, 27 shots, 4 on target, and a 2.45 xG. That is the conversation in around Liverpool for the data when they played against Burnley, in pushing for some all importance goal in the dying numbers. Once Leslie Ugochukwu Eddie's red card, then it opened it up for Liverpool for in there. They got a penalty in the. Virgil van Dijk was the only Liverpool player to win 100% of his duels in the first half versus Burnley. In fact, in the first half, it was duel. And you see, this thing of Virgil van Dijk being the only Liverpool player to win 100% of his duels is the reason why I keep on saying that the personality of Virgil van Dijk is different from a lot of people. He makes a lot of difference if it's in a team. See, times where you need just a physical presence. He doesn't have to be the most flamboyant, doesn't make mistakes, but people underestimate the importance of Virgil van Dijk in that Liverpool team. He is a personality. In fact, throughout the first half, Burnley were winning duels against Liverpool, but for one man, and that is the captain of Abrantia, your friend of Virgil van Dijk on the night, who got a job done. Later in the day, it was Abrantia, near friend Abrantia, your friend Mohamed Salah, and your penalty on Abrantia friend Hannibal Mejbri, of course, huge one. After say a big second yellow card on Abrantia friend Leslie Ugochukwu, a tackle on Abrantia friend Federico Alexis McAllister. I think that was a red card. That was a clean red card on the part of Abrantia friend Leslie Ugochukwu, and of course that means that Leslie Ugochukwu had to go off, and a big advantage to Liverpool. When they pushed on, they got a penalty and they got a job done from Abrantia friend Mohamed Salah. No Liverpool player created more chances from open play or completed more take-ons than Ryan Gravenberch in that first half against Burnley. He was the most impressive Liverpool player in that first half. He did the job exactly as he had to do. Of course, game week 4, Mohamed Salah has gotten the job done. That is exactly what Liverpool are doing. No matter how far the game gets stretched, he gets the job done. Of course, Liverpool in the game won the ball more times, even though the dominated possession were much more in control after winning the ball. Favorite passes, you can see Salah's run and passes attempted into the box clearly. Liverpool were in full control of the game from the start to the finish, the start of the game to the second. They should, of course, it was very, very important in terms of how Liverpool playing the game. Personally, really liking this post-match, post-recovery maps. Show some unseen actions clearly there. Of course, it was very interesting in terms of how Liverpool played. Burnley versus Liverpool, progressive actions in the first half, and Liverpool were way better in terms of penetration in the box with Domenico Szoboszlai in midfield. Salah, Niflo and Vate were more involved in the second half. Of course, Domenico was very, very important for them. Of course, Mohamed Salah in a penalty, in the 90 plus minutes. What it means is that Abrantia friend Mohamed Salah converted it in the 95th minute. And what that means is that in terms of the English Premier League, all-time greats, all-time, CSA player be a all-time highest number of goals scored. Mohamed Salah has now moved to fourth position. Fourth position. That is where Mohamed Salah is in the dying numbers. That is where he is. And I've said it several times here. Mohamed Salah obviously is probably the greatest African to have played in the English Premier League. The greatest African to have played in the English Premier League. Somebody says the greatest African player ever played in the English Premier League probably becomes Abrante Samuel Eto'o, but the greatest African to have played in the English Premier League, or Eto'o also played there. That is the greatest African performer in the English Premier League. The greatest Premier League African performer. Abrante Mohamed Salah. All-time goal scorers, Alan Shearer with 260. Harry Kane 213, Wayne Rooney 208, Mohamed Salah 188. Mohamed Salah is coming after Wayne Rooney's record. 12 more goals and then he gets into the 200s, and then 20 goals he catches Mohamed Salah. 30 goals this season, what it means that Mohamed Salah is going to be the third highest player in terms of goals of English Premier League, and of course maybe 5 more he'll go after Harry Kane as the highest, second highest goal scorer of English Premier League. He can get the job done. What it means is that Liverpool for now had gone on top of the English Premier League. They had gone at the apex of the English Premier League. 4 games unbeaten, back to back to back to back. Liverpool for now shown everybody say the real people in terms of getting the job done in such huge matches our English Premier League, in that they will stamp the authority in their feet in making sure that they are the best team in that regard. They got a job. Of course, after turning the attention away, Liverpool for now called top of the English Premier League. What it meant is that we had to focus and have a big conversation in the huge Manchester derby. The big question was lingering for everybody, that who was going to come out top. Was it going to be Abrante Ruben Amorim? It was the big question. Or was going to be Abrante, of course, Joseph Guardiola, or it was going to be Abrante Ruben Amorim. Before coming into this game, there was the big conversation around the number of players that had been injured for Manchester City, but I think that they still fielded a very, very strong side, a huge, strong side in terms of the quality of depth that Manchester City have in that regard. It was a big one because last season, Ruben Amorim went away to the Etihad and beat Manchester City straight up. So a lot of people thought, okay, he can get a job done. And of course, Ruben Amorim has also had some success playing against Josep Guardiola. So then maybe, obviously, he can go back to go back there and also get more success against Josep Guardiola. Was that what was going to happen? It remained a question at the time. And of course, before we got into the game, do not forget that Manchester City had lost 2 games on a spin. In fact, they are lost against Brighton and Hove Albion, and they are also lost against Tottenham Hotspur. So it meant that Man City had a little bit, Manchester United had a little bit of a template that you can come into it. I remember in my pre-match analysis on the 4 Post podcast, and even on Insha on Saturday, I did mention to the guys that if the game becomes more more chaotic, it feeds into the ability of Manchester United to win the game. If the game becomes more open, second balls, all of these things, the Manchester United will be in the game as long as possible. They can win it, even if it's just 1 second to go, unless Josep Guardiola has absolute control. So if you look at the lineup that Pep Guardiola went into the game with, it was about absolute control. Manchester City were below Manchester United on the table before the game started. So it was about, okay, how was the game going to pan out? Like, who was going to get the control that we were all looking for? Was it going to be Manchester City, or was it going to be Ruben Amorim that gets his team to thrive on the chaotic nature of the game and then make sure that they get the result from the how was the game going to be like? I think that it was such an interesting one, and a huge derby over there for team and friend Manchester City. Of course, in terms of the players that were available, Man City went into the game with Gianluigi Donnarumma, Abdulkader Kosenav as the right back. At right back, he played Abdulkader Kosenav. The 2 centre backs were Ruben Dias and Josko Guardiola. Played Nico Oriali at left back. In that regard, of course, the lack of centre backs and the sale of Abantia, your friend Emmanuel Akanji to Inter Milan, meant that this Man City team had to make some changes, and Nico Oriali went there to left back as a makeshift. Of course, there was a boost because Abrantia friend Rodri Cascante returned into the middle of the park as the sixth central campestro controller in the middle of the park to really create some good style of play and then make sure they give a chance to Manchester City. Flanked by him was two very hard-working midfielders who had to work more, cover a lot of ground, and also add some creative bites to the Manchester City team. And it was one, Tijani Reinders, who was in the middle of the park together with Abantia, your friend Phil Foden. Phil Foden was part of the list of the players that were in there for team my friend in Manchester City to try and really hold the grabs and then turn the screw around against team my friend Manchester United. Of course, up top it was Haaland as a centre for Jeremy Doku on the left hand side of the attack, and then of course Abrantia, your friend Bernardo Silva led the line. So it means that it was a debut game for Abrantia, your friend Gianluigi Donnarumma. Of course, Man City fans were excited to come in. And I think that Man City, especially with Josep Guardiola, he saw this as a huge chance to really exert himself and then control things and come back to winning ways and show everybody that he is the real guy. And I mean this in the sense of Pep Guardiola and what he could do in games, because he knew that this was going to be a huge game. He knew that this was a big opportunity for Pep Guardiola, to stamp his authority and come back, because a lot of the people were asking questions about his methods, his team, and even what he brought on board, and whether it was time for Pep Guardiola to exit the scene just like Arsene Wenger or maybe Sir Alex Ferguson or whoever the case is. So it was a big deal. See, the sad thing was that after Manchester United lost this game, Sir Alex Ferguson was in the stadium at Etihad and he got beaten in that regard. He got destroyed. He got torn apart by Manchester friend Sir Alex Ferguson. Manchester United went into the game with some changes in there as well. It was a game where we all expected that there were going to be changes. Of course, Arthur Bayinda was in post for Manchester United. We know the story of Abrantia, your friend Andre Onana, who has left to go and play in the Turkish Super League, for Trabzonspor. So obviously, we knew that was going to happen for Abrantia, your friend Andre Onana. In that regard, we knew that there was going to be a different team. If you look at the starting lineup that Manchester United went in, it was Bayinda in post. The back three was made up of Nusa Nasrawi as the backline, Abrantia, friend of Delect in there, Matthias Delect in there as the CCB. On the other side was Abrantia friend Lenny Yoro as the back three in that regard. Of course, the wing backs were Abrantia friend Patrick Dogu, many Abrantia friend Luke Shaw. These are the two players in that regard. Of course, in the middle of the park, played with Bruno Fernandes, added Manuel Ugarte to add some steel into the middle of the park. So it was a midfield two of Bruno Fernandes and then Manuel Ugarte in that regard. And up top, he had Brian Mbeumo, Amad Diallo, and then Abrantia, your friend of Benjamin Sesko. So you can even look at it as the back three was Abrantia, your friend Nusa Nasrawi, who was one of the wing backs actually, Delect, then Yeli Yoro in that regard, and added Luke Shaw. Then of course had Patrick Dogu and of course Amad Diallo as the wing backs, and then playing. Of course, see, one of the bigger issues of Manchester United and then their setup is how the outside centre backs don't tend to close in well. But to be very honest with you, I think that this is something that Manchester United did very well in terms of closing down in the half spaces with the outside centre backs. They did very well. I was particularly surprised when, from the opening of the game, it was very clear that United were comfortable in letting the outside centre backs, which was Nusa Nasrawi, any Abrantia, your friend, Lenny Yoro and the likes, step into the middle of the park. I was really surprised in that regard. I did not expect that Manchester United were going to be comfortable. Of course, given what Ruben Amorim has set up his team to be like, to be able to go into games and comfortably try to press and counter press Manchester City and open the game up in that regard. I liked it. So from the off of the game was very aggressive, very aggressive, because like I said, it was clear that Manchester United wanted to press. It was clear that they wanted to come into the game and not sit off anybody. They wanted to really impose themselves on the game and then get the results that they wanted to get. It was clear that they believed that they were a better side and they can compete with them. And again, they were very comfortable going long. Again, going back to the chaotic nature of how Ruben Amorim wanted to make the game that I've been talking about, they were comfortable in going long into the head of Brian Mbeumo and of course that of Benjamin Sesko, just so they could try and pick up the second balls. It was such an important part of Ruben Amorim's setup going into that game to make sure that he had everything that he wanted to get in terms of physicality, in terms of transitional play, in terms of picking up the second balls, and also being aggressive in the press. And throughout it was easy. I think that they had some successes early on, but Man City had the calmness and technical players to be able to control the game, and that's exactly how we predicted. Okay, Manchester United will make the game more chaotic. When they do, it is the onus now lies on Manchester City to calm down the game, to use their technical players to play through that press, and then hope for the opening. And they did. And boy, Manchester City did that because they had the players to get that job done. When Manchester United were pressing Manchester City, it was successful for them. But what Manchester City sort of did in this game was that they were also okay going long into the channels, whether it was Bernardo Silva, who had a key role in this setup, playing more or less like a half winger. That's how we call it, more like a number 7, but then also more like a midfielder in the middle of the park to try and open up the game and stretch play, and then find openings for Manchester City to come up in there. The technical ability in the middle of the park of Tijani Reinders and Phil Foden was very important. In fact, it got to a point in the first half where Manchester City had pinned Manchester United in their area. Now it was about doing what again they had to do in settled play. So when the game started, you could tell the Manchester United were comfortable in jumping, and that's what we call it, in jumping from their shape to go into centrally to go and press and counter press and do all of those things. But then again, the bigger problem was that were they willing to also do that in settled play when the whole game had slowed down? And that is where Abrante's friend Jeremy Doku, in fact, before then there had been some openings for Erling Haaland to come in and then get a goal from there. That had not happened. Of course, Manchester United had defended a little better in that regard. And then later on, as the game did wear on, Jeremy Doku. See, one of the best attributes of Jeremy Doku in his gameplay is that nimble-footedness out Kitano. Sending Otimi far ball, then he dribbles through the masses, plays through the thirds, opens things up, and then create chances and get the job done. That is one of the best attributes of our brand here friend Jeremy Doku. I mean, it sets him apart. That really sets up that goal for team friend Manchester City, because he literally just picks up the ball in the half space. I mean, drops his shoulders 1, 2, 3, and then trying to cut the ball across the face of goal. Manchester United defends the first one, sends in another one, and of course, the on-rushing Phil Foden. The importance of the box crashing midfielder in that 6-yard box, in and around the 18-yard box where you have to get a job done. It's important for team your friend Manchester City, and that's the first one from our brand your friend Phil Foden. Last season, it was not a good one for Phil Foden. This season, Manchester City have not started so well, but immediately Phil Foden got into his groove. You could tell, Manchester City were in tune, they were turned on, they were ready to play in such a very, very huge game that you have been talking about every day. They say that they want to go on and win. And they did exactly that, dominating play, being physical enough, winning the second balls, being very aggressive, making sure that it's difficult for Manchester United to create sustained quality chances against them, and then making sure that at the end of the day, they get success in how they want to play. That is exactly how Manchester City opened up and then set up in such a goal, getting that very first goal from team your friend Manchester United. I mean, immediately that first goal had gone through, it was always going to be a Herculean task for team your friend Manchester United, and it was a total performance. Nico really put up an excellent performance in there. Of course, it was a very good one also from